Hello, and welcome back to your course on international entrepreneurship and in particular our international overview. And in this part of our topic area, we're going to be looking at the dimensions of entrepreneurship. This translates very nicely into our second learning outcome for the topic area. So by the end of this session, you'll be able to understand the main dimensions of enterprise and entrepreneurial activity. But let's start with the definition. So, in 1989, Timmons was suggesting that entrepreneurship is the ability to create and build something from practically nothing. It is initiating, achieving, and building an enterprise or organization, rather than just watching, analyzing, or describing one. It is the knack for sensing an opportunity where others see chaos, contradiction, and confusion. Now, depending on what textbook you're accessing and reading, and maybe you've taken a look at some papers or articles on entrepreneurship, you'll see various different definitions. But some of the key points that unites all of those definitions are, for example, opportunity recognition, the creative act of organization building, gathering and organizing resources to create value. Entrepreneurship could also be about exploiting knowledge, and possibly about risk-taking. Let's take a look at a mini case example. So Karina von Baer, she grew up in a depressed region of Chile, and this region was dominated by agriculture. The area was very vulnerable to global price swings, as most farmers are in commodity markets. Karina's family were involved in agriculture through the family seed business. So in 1998, she trained as an agroeconomist, and then she joined the family seed grain business in Chile, and she founded 2 new companies designed to help farmers move into more niche market areas. 4 years later, she founded Granotop, a new company specializing in the selling of specialist varieties of wheat grains for specific applications. And 2 years after this, she founded Oleotop, which produces rapeseed oil as a foodstuff for the salmon industry. So drawing on the commonalities of definitions of entrepreneurship, we can see in this case study that Karina was founding, for example, 2 new companies. Can we not relate that to organization buildings? She was helping farmers move into more niche market areas. There was mentions of specific applications, specialist varieties. Is that not about exploiting and leveraging knowledge? So let's take a look at some of the arenas of entrepreneurial activity. Where can we find entrepreneurship? Well, we can say that entrepreneurial opportunities can be found simply everywhere. Some are genuinely new. Some are innovatory improvements on a theme. Some are limited growth ideas. Some can be used to build global businesses. As Bolton and Thompson were saying, they can only succeed if they are different in some meaningful way and executed efficiently. There is then an infinite set of possibilities for people with the talent and temperament to become successful entrepreneurs to choose from. On your right-hand side of the screen there, you can see some examples of where we can find entrepreneurship. Now, typically, we tend to think of entrepreneurship as for-profit ventures. These are translated as new small startups. We can also talk about something called intrapreneurship or corporate entrepreneurship. These are large organizations which leverage entrepreneurship and innovation into building some sort of new venture within the organization. We can also see examples of social entrepreneurship, civic entrepreneurship, and criminal entrepreneurship. And we're going to touch on these in a while. So, for example, social enterprise. Now, the difference between social enterprise and for-profit enterprise is in some ways quite small. Both are concerned with generating a profit. The difference is that social enterprises will take that profit and plough it all back into the enterprise. As an example, we can see the case of Bart Wegens. Interesting guy. He's a Belgian Buddhist monk and a social entrepreneur. In Africa, he started a small company called Apopo. So I don't want to spoil too much of this example. So the next slide, if you click onto it, is a video. If it doesn't load for some reason, you can find a copy of this in the multimedia folder in Learn. So what I'd like you to do now is to pause on this slide, and I'd like you to open another window and go to the following website. And then once you've looked at the example of king rats in Africa, then you can come back to the session. So, let me pause now and ask you a question. Do you think there's a difference between a social entrepreneur and a for-profit entrepreneur? Go back to Timon's definition and some of the key principles that we've just seen there. Do you think there's a difference? So what I'd like you to do now is to pause on this slide and reflect on that question. And then when you've finished, you can move on to the next slide. So you probably found then when you were reflecting that the differences between social entrepreneurs and for-profit entrepreneurs are actually quite difficult to identify. In terms of the enterprises themselves, there's no particular strong consensus or agreement in the different definitions. However, one of the differences, or one of the strongest differences, is that for social enterprises, all the profits are ploughed back into the organisation. At this point, we should really highlight the difference then between the entrepreneur and the venture. Although they're closely linked and related, they're not quite the same thing. We need to remember this as the course progresses. Now, another example of entrepreneurship is civic entrepreneurship. Now, I'm not going to go through this in a huge amounts of detail, either now or throughout the course, but if you are interested, you can press pause here and read through this mini case study on your own leisure. And our final different type of entrepreneurial activity is criminal enterprise. Now we're going to look at criminal enterprise in our topic 7 in a lot more detail, but for now, let me talk to you about a mini case study about Ray Beatson and the Millennium Dome. Now Ray Beatson was the leader of a team which tried in the year 2000 to snatch £200 million worth of diamonds from the Millennium Dome in London. You can see that on the right hand side of your screen. Now, Beatson himself was a successful career criminal, and he was allegedly involved in drug trafficking and money laundering prior to the attempted dome robbery. So how did the robbery develop? Well, first of all, Beatson invested some of his own money in the plot, and resources from one of his co-conspirators, i.e. another one of the team, he remortgaged his house. And together they invested $500,000 in the project. Now, over 8 months, a team of around 8 people, they plotted to steal the diamonds, and they planned to break into the dome using a JCB digger. Now, if you don't know what a digger is, it's just a large piece of machinery that's normally used on building sites to pick up large amounts of earth. And the plan was to escape along the Thames using a high-speed speedboat. Now, as I mentioned, Beatson was a successful career criminal, and he was allegedly involved in drug trafficking and money laundering prior to the attempted dome robbery, so he had experience. Ultimately, though, the plot proved unsuccessful, with the police arresting the entire team inside the dome, and Beatson himself is currently serving 15 years for his part in the robbery. So before we move on though to our next session, let me stop and ask you a question. You might want to press pause here and reflect. So what do you think the similarities and the differences are between these different types of enterprises and the entrepreneurs themselves? So that's it for this session, and so when you're ready, click on 1D